Hello everyone. Welcome back to Anime Octopus. I'm so glad to have you here. Today, we're diving into part 3 of our ongoing series, What if Naruko inherited the intelligence of both Minato and Kushina? Just imagine the possibilities. Naruko, not only with incredible power, but with the sharp strategic mind of her legendary parents. Things are about to get very interesting. Disclaimer: this content is purely for entertainment and discussion. I do not own any of the anime footage shown. All rights go to their respective creators and copyright holders. So grab a snack, sit back, and let's get into it. The past 2 weeks had flown by for the energetic, soon-to-be Chunin blonde. Naruko had been training diligently, devoting her time to perfecting a new jutsu. After 3 intense weeks of working with 300 shadow clones for 7 hours each day, she was now incredibly close to completing it. Thanks to the nature of the shadow clone technique, Naruko had accumulated what felt like nearly 5 years of experience in just weeks. She truly appreciated the usefulness of the shadow clone jutsu. During this time, Team Shisui had also taken on several C-ranked missions, mostly light-duty assignments such as deliveries and escort tasks. Both Shisui and Itachi wanted to make sure Naruko remained in top condition for the upcoming Chunin exams. Over those weeks, Naruko found herself missing Temari. Even though Temari could be assertive and occasionally push her buttons, Naruko had enjoyed the conversations they shared when she was in Konoha. While she also liked talking with Shisui, Itachi, or Kakashi, conversations with Temari always felt a bit different. Naruko eventually reasoned that she missed Temari because she was her first real female friend. She did speak occasionally with Kurenai, but the age gap between her and Temari was just 1 year, compared to the 12 years between her and Kurenai. In time, Naruko had come to see Kurenai as something of an older sister figure. Now, the blonde Jinan was walking confidently toward the Konoha Ninja Academy, where the Chunin exam was set to take place. Upon entering the building, she made her way to the 3rd floor. She noticed the long hallway and immediately performed a hand sign. "Kai," she whispered, dispelling the genjutsu illusion placed on the corridor. She continued down the hall until she reached the double door. Taking a deep, calming breath, she pushed it open, and was immediately hit with a wave of pressure from the strong presence of other Jinan. Still, it didn't faze her in the slightest. Naruko walked past a few of the other hopeful candidates and found a quiet corner of the room. Moments later, an older Jinan from Konoha approached her. "Hey! What's someone your size doing here?" he asked playfully, his tone drawing a few chuckles from nearby Jinan. Those who knew Naruko simply shook their heads, familiar with her abilities. Naruko calmly met the older boy's gaze. For a moment, their eyes locked. Suddenly, the boy stiffened and gasped. What's going on?" he asked, visibly unsettled. Naruko offered a small, confident smile. "Just a little paralysis genjutsu, pretty handy, don't you think?" she replied before releasing the technique. The boy stumbled back to his team, clearly shaken, while murmurs spread throughout the room about the blonde Jinan's skill. A few minutes later, the proctor for the first stage of the exam arrived and instructed everyone to take a seat. The first stage turned out to be quite straightforward for Naruko. It resembled a standard written test, though the questions were challenging enough that even many Jonin might struggle. Fortunately, Naruko had always been a bit of a bookworm and was able to answer the questions with ease. Eventually, she realized that the purpose of the test was not only to answer the questions, but also to find hidden Chunin and gather information without getting caught. For the 10th and final question, the proctor used an intimidation technique in an attempt to shake the examinee's confidence. But Naruko stayed calm. After all, her mother had been more intimidating than any proctor could ever hope to be. Once the first stage ended, Naruko and the other Jinan who passed followed the proctor to the location of the second stage, Training Ground 44, also known as the Forest of Trials. Naruko already had some experience in the forest, as her team had once spent 4 days training there. This gave her a slight edge over many of the others, some of whom had never even heard of the area before. After the proctor explained the next phase of the exam, the teams were each given a scroll, either heaven or earth, and were asked to sign a waiver acknowledging the challenge of the task. Naruko's team received an Earth Scroll and was assigned to one of the 44 gates that led into the forest. At Naruko's right was a team from Kumo, and to her left, a team from Iwa. Just great, she thought, taking it in stride. The gates opened, signaling the start of the exam. Naruko leapt into the forest with practiced agility, already planning her next move. She considered two options. First, she could go after the Kumo team, obtain their scroll, and make her way to the tower at the center of the forest to complete the exam. The second option was to do the same with the Iwa team. While it was possible she might run into more than one team, Naruko was confident that things would go her way. She decided to go with the first option and changed direction to intercept the Kumo team. After about 10 minutes of moving through the forest, she spotted them, 3 Kumo Genin standing in a clearing, discussing their strategy. Carefully, Naruko formed a plan. She positioned herself silently on a thick tree branch above them, using her chakra to stick upside down to the wood. Then, with a swift motion, she leapt down. The Kumo team had no idea what hit them. In a flash, Naruko gently but effectively knocked out one of the Genin before they even realized she was there. Before the remaining 2 could respond, she performed a series of hand signs at remarkable speed. Water style, water sphere technique, she declared. A dense orb of water shot from her palms and struck one of the Genin squarely, sending him flying into a nearby tree. The impact dazed him, and he slumped to the ground, completely out of the fight. Naruko landed gracefully, alert and ready for whatever came next. By the time her teammate had been rendered unconscious, the third Genin swiftly drew a ninjato and charged toward Naruko. She reacted quickly, raising 2 kunai to block the overhead strike. The Kumo Genin followed up with a horizontal swing, but Naruko gracefully ducked underneath and attempted to sweep her opponent off their feet. The other ninja anticipated the move and leapt into the air. However, Naruko showcased her agility, performing a handstand and delivering a precise upward kick that struck her opponent under the chin. Seizing the moment, the young kunoichi flipped backward into a somersault to create distance and swiftly went through a series of hand signs. Her opponent, still disoriented from the blow, couldn't respond in time. Lightning style, shock pulse jutsu, she called out confidently. Naruko extended her palms, releasing 2 streams of blue energy that surged forward and struck the Kumo Genin, leaving them stunned and unconscious. Without wasting time, Naruko began searching the 3 ninja for the required scroll. She located it on the girl she had encountered first. With a pleased smile, she tucked the heaven scroll into her pouch. Perfect. Time to head for the tower and complete the second stage, she said, leaping swiftly from branch to branch. If I'm fast enough, I might even beat Itachi's record, she added with a determined grin, picking up speed. Dash. 5 days later. During her wait at the tower, Naruko learned that if too many Genin passed the second stage, a preliminary round would be held before the final phase of the exams. On the morning of that day, she woke up early, stretched, and went through her warm-ups. Right on time, a Chunin entered the room to inform her that the preliminaries were about to begin. When Naruko entered the arena, she was surprised to see the Hokage present along with several Jonin. All the teams who passed the second stage had gathered. As the room settled, the third Hokage began his announcement, explaining the purpose of the preliminary matches, primarily to ensure the final round remained exciting and manageable for the many nobles and officials planning to attend. Naruko perked up when Hiruzen mentioned that not only the Land of Fire's daimyo would attend, but also the Raikage of the Cloud, the Tsuchikage of the Stone, and the Kazekage of the Sand, along with his daughter, Tamari. As expected, many distinguished guests will be attending the finals, Hiruzen said with a gentle smile. Naruko's eyes widened in excitement, and a confident grin appeared on her face. Once the proctor explained the rules and gave anyone injured or exhausted the chance to forfeit, the remaining Genin were directed to the observation balcony. There, Naruko was delighted to see familiar faces among the Jonin sensei, including both Itachi and Shisui. Hey, Naruko. I heard you shattered Itachi's record, Shisui said with a playful tone, causing Itachi's eyebrow to twitch slightly at the reminder. Naruko chuckled, rubbing the back of her head with a faint blush. Well, what can I say? I'm pretty amazing. Before they could continue chatting, the proctor announced the first match. As others turned to watch, Naruko leaned casually against the wall, turning to her friends. So, what were you two up to while I was gone? She asked curiously. I've been working on my taijutsu and spending more time with Sasuke, Itachi replied. Naruko looked pleasantly surprised. Sasuke? He's 2 years old now, right? She asked, receiving a nod in return. And you, Shisui? She asked, raising an eyebrow at his smirk. I've been spending the week making new friends, he said proudly. Naruko gave him a puzzled look, while Itachi sighed quietly. What? Shisui asked, noticing their expressions. I can't be the only one on our team who's still single. I am the oldest, after all, he added with a cheeky grin, clearly enjoying the moment. Temari is not my girlfriend. Izumi is not my girlfriend. The two shouted in unison, prompting Itachi to smile even wider when everyone, even those in the middle of sparring, turned toward the two young ninja, both of whom were blushing brightly. Naturally, the crowd soon returned to their own activities, especially those watching Team Shisui. Naruko sighed and leaned back against the wall. I seriously don't like you right now, Naruko muttered, her gaze drifting toward the arena where one of the participants was being guided gently to the infirmary. The blonde turned to her dark-haired friend upon hearing him chuckle. What are you laughing at? She asked with a mildly annoyed expression, catching bits of the proctor's voice as the next match was being announced in the background. Come on, Naruko, cheer up. Your friend Temari is coming back to Konoha in about 3 weeks, just in time for the final stage of the exams. She'll be staying until it's all over, Shisui said with a grin. Naruko frowned at his teasing tone, especially the way he always hinted that Temari was more than just a friend. She turned away, but a soft smile crept onto her face as she thought about seeing Temari again. Will Namikaze Naruko and Yagami Kumiko please come down to the arena? The proctor called. Without hesitation, the blonde Janon leapt over the railing and landed gracefully, waiting for her opponent, who chose to descend using the stairs. Kumiko was another Janon from Konoha. He looked around 12 or 13, had short brown hair and soft green eyes. His outfit consisted of a black shirt and blue pants. Naruko studied him thoughtfully and concluded that while he might not appear particularly exceptional, appearances could often be deceiving in the shinobi world. As soon as the proctor gave the signal to begin, Kumiko jumped back to create some space between them. While airborne, he threw a dozen kunai at Naruko. With precise aim, she pulled out 6 of her own and threw them in such a way that they deflected every single one of the incoming kunai. The moment Kumiko landed, he quickly performed a series of hand signs. Fire style, great fireball jutsu. He called out, releasing a large orb of flame toward Naruko. Naruko, unfazed, began her own sequence of hand seals at a calm and steady pace. After completing the final sign, she called out, water style, water dragon jutsu. Water swirled around her, forming into a powerful dragon with glowing yellow eyes. It surged forward and collided with Kumiko's fireball mid-air. Naruko's technique easily overpowered the flame, forcing Kumiko to leap aside to avoid being overwhelmed. As he landed, he hurled a shuriken at Naruko and performed more hand signs. Ninja art, shadow shuriken jutsu. He said, and the single shuriken multiplied into 40, all heading toward Naruko. Without hesitation, she performed 2 quick hand signs and crouched as water rose around her. Water style, water wall jutsu. She declared. The swirling wall of water shielded her completely, stopping every shuriken in their tracks. Seeing that Kumiko was already breathing heavily, Naruko decided it was time to bring the match to a close. She formed a single hand sign and vanished in a flicker, reappearing just a couple of meters away from her opponent. Kumiko barely had time to react before Naruko launched a swift flurry of punches and kicks. He did his best to block and dodge, but her attacks grew faster and faster, turning into nothing more than blurs. With the increased speed, Kumiko struggled to keep up. He was soon being hit repeatedly, unable to maintain focus. Eventually, Naruko delivered a clean, rising kick to his chin that sent him backward, bringing the match to a decisive end. Even though Kumiko had shown great determination, Naruko's speed and precision had gradually worn him down. His resilience had kept him on his feet longer than expected, but with the final kick, it was clear the match had reached its conclusion. As soon as Kumiko touched the cold ground, a squad of medics, who had been waiting since Naruko began to accelerate the match, hurried over and gently carried the older Jinan to the infirmary. Meanwhile, the proctor announced Naruko as the winner. When the blonde Kunoichi stepped onto the balcony, she was warmly congratulated by her two teammates, although not without Shisui playfully teasing her about why she took the full 3 minutes. The trio didn't pay much attention to the remaining matches and instead chatted casually about everyday things. So, when the Hokage's voice called everyone to gather and receive their number for the final stage bracket, Naruko was a bit surprised that the preliminaries had already come to an end. Along with the other participants who had advanced, Naruko descended to the designated area where a jonin handed out slips of paper, each marked with a number. "Alright, here are the matchups for the final stage of the Chunin exams," the jonin announced as everyone turned their attention to a small board beside him. 1. Match, Saburo of Konoha vs Noriko of Iwa. 2. Match, Nanami of Suna vs Naruko of Konoha. 3. Match, Ko of Konoha vs Hiroshi of Suna. 4. Match, Rikudo of Kumo vs Ichiro of Suna. You'll have 1 month to prepare for the final stage, which will be held at the Great Leaf Arena. If there are no questions, you are all dismissed, said Hiruzen before walking away. After the Sandaime Hokage's announcement, Naruko and her team made their way quickly through the forest toward the village. There wasn't any particular reason for their rush, although they were certainly glad to avoid any of the forest's wildlife. As soon as they exited the trees, they relaxed, knowing they were back in safe territory. Turning to his youngest teammate, Shisui asked, "So, Naruko, any plans for the month ahead?" Itachi also seemed interested, recalling how he once trained intensely with his father and Shisui during his own break. "Well, Uro-Sennin said he'll let me sign the Toad summoning contract, so I'll be working on summoning techniques and training with the Toads for the first week. For the rest of the month, I'll be improving my jutsu with Uro-Sennin's guidance. And when I'm not training or resting, I'll probably meet up with Tamari-chan," Naruko replied with a grin, causing her teammates to chuckle at her nickname for one of the legendary Sannin. "So, how about a training session this evening?" Itachi suggested as they entered the more crowded streets of Konoha. Naruko nodded enthusiastically, but Shisui shook his head, surprising his younger teammates. "Why not, Shisui?" asked the Uchiha heir. "I have a date at 6 tonight," Shisui said with a sheepish grin. "And after our usual training sessions, I'm usually too sore to move properly, definitely not a good idea before a date." Naruko raised an eyebrow while Itachi gave him a look of disbelief. "What?" Shisui asked innocently. "Isn't that like your 4th date this week?" Itachi asked, causing Naruko to burst into laughter. Shisui mumbled something about teammates who are too observant, which only made Naruko laugh harder, and even Itachi couldn't help but chuckle. After they had calmed down, they strolled through the peaceful streets of the village. After a few minutes, they arrived at Ichiraku Ramen, where they decided to enjoy a meal together. The trio ate quietly, enjoying each other's company, until they heard 2 familiar voices approaching. "Kakashi, my eternal rival. I am confident that young Naruko will appreciate my gift even more, and with it, her spirit of youth will shine even brighter," came the enthusiastic voice of Guy, his energy as vibrant as ever. Kakashi let out a light sigh in response. Did you say something, Guy?" the silver-haired jonin asked with a laid-back tone, causing Team Shisui to chuckle at the familiar dynamic. Guy, ever expressive, launched into a passionate declaration about Kakashi's demeanor being too relaxed. Moments later, the 2 ninjas stepped into the ramen shop. Kakashi greeted them with a gentle wave and a signature smile that showed in his eyes. "Yo!" he said casually. Guy's greeting, on the other hand, was filled with his usual energetic flair, radiating his trademark enthusiasm and positivity. Yosh! Young budding leaves of Konoha, I'm the splendid green beast of Konoha, might Guy. But you too may call me the breeze that helps your flame of youth shine even brighter. The enthusiastic black-haired Chunin declared with a gleam of energy, pumping his fist into the air. The two Uchiha siblings exchanged glances, each with a small sweat drop forming, and Itachi could have sworn he saw actual flames of passion sparkling in Guy's eyes. I'm thrilled to finally meet the two teammates of the spirited Naruko-chan. Yes, Naruko coughed politely into her hand. These are Uchiha Itachi and Shisui, she introduced her two teammates, who gave respectful nods to the Jonin. So, what brings you two here? The blonde Kunoichi asked as she leaned lightly on the table. Kakashi offered her a kind smile and retrieved a small box from within his cloak. He handed it to Naruko, who looked at the Anbu with curiosity as she raised an eyebrow. I wanted to give you a little gift, Kakashi explained, for breaking Itachi-san's record during the second stage of the Chunin exams. And I have a feeling I'm not the only one who has something for you, though I'm not talking about Guy. Naruko smiled and opened the small box. As soon as she looked inside, her eyes lit up in surprise. She pulled out a sleek black face mask, styled just like Kakashi's. Congratulations, Kakashi said warmly. Thanks, Kakashi-ni. Naruko beamed as she tried on the mask, it fit perfectly. There's one more gift, Kakashi added with a playful tone, but you'll only get it once you officially become a Chunin. Naruko grinned, already imagining what it might be. Young Naruko-chan, I have something for you too. Guy exclaimed enthusiastically, holding out another package. Naruko turned toward him, one brow arched. Did you say something, Guy-sensei? She asked, tilting her head in curiosity. Both Guy and Kakashi suddenly froze. Guy was the first to react, dropping to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he dramatically lamented Kakashi corrupting Naruko with his mask and how she was now too cool for her age. Meanwhile, Kakashi couldn't hide his amusement as he chuckled behind his own mask. Ha ha! He laughed with playful exaggeration. I've done it! I've created a clone of myself. The three younger shinobi watched the scene, sweat dropping at the sight. After a few more minutes, the two Jonin finally composed themselves. Now it was Guy's turn to present his gift. Naruko, still wearing her new mask, opened the package and looked inside. A scroll? She asked, carefully unrolling it. As her eyes scanned the title of the technique written on the parchment, they widened in shock. Guy-sensei, I can't accept this, Naruko said sincerely, trying to hand the scroll back. But Guy gave her a confident thumbs up. Naruko-chan, if there's anyone I trust to use this technique responsibly, it's you. I believe in you. Just remember, it's a powerful skill, so only use it when protecting something truly important to you. With that, he smiled warmly and disappeared in a burst of speed, leaving a gentle breeze in his place. Naruko's two teammates turned toward her, curiosity sparkling in their eyes. Even Kakashi leaned in slightly, interested. What kind of technique is it? They asked in unison. Naruko paused for a moment before carefully rolling up the scroll. She placed it back into the box and sealed it inside a secure scroll for safekeeping. The 8 inner gates, she replied quietly. Namikaze residence, later. Sometime later, Naruko was at home, lounging in her living room. She watched TV idly, waiting for her godfather to arrive. The white-haired Sanin had written in his last letter that he would be visiting today, but so far, there was no sign of him. Naruko sighed and flopped back on the sofa. Where is he already? She thought, growing restless. After a few more uneventful minutes, she stood up, considering how to pass the time. Her first instinct was to go train, but she hesitated. If I train now, I might be too tired when he shows up, she reasoned. Am I really this boring? She wondered with a frown, realizing she could only think of training to fill the time. She began to think about what others might do in her situation. Oba-san would probably relax with some tea or go play a game of shogi. I'm not really into that. Shisui would probably go out and meet someone, can't do that now. Itachi might spend time with his little brother, not really an option either. And Uro-senin. He'd probably be writing his books. That's not exactly something I want to copy. Naruko sighed again and flopped back on the sofa, waiting patiently, though still hopeful, that her godfather would arrive soon. That's it. She said with a bright smile and headed to her study. I can write a book, how hard can it be? She encouraged herself. Once she entered the room, she took a seat at the large oak desk. She opened one drawer where she kept her paper, then a second drawer to retrieve her brushes and writing supplies. Let's see. The blonde began to write, completely absorbed in her work, not even noticing how quickly the day went by as she spent the entire afternoon at her desk. Later that night, long after midnight, when Jiraiya stepped into the study, he let out a quiet chuckle. There was his goddaughter, peacefully asleep with her face resting on several sheets of paper and a brush still held gently in her hand. The next day. That morning, after Naruko woke up, she was pleasantly surprised to find Jiraiya already at home. Curious but not overly concerned, she simply shrugged it off and headed to the kitchen to make herself some breakfast. Once they had eaten, the two made their way to the backyard, where the legendary ninja pulled out a package and handed it to Naruko, who looked at it in surprise. Go ahead, open it. I think you're really going to like it, the white-haired sage said with a smile, watching her reaction. Naruko didn't hesitate. She opened the package eagerly, and her bright blue eyes widened when she saw what was inside. It was a short-sleeved haori, very similar in design to her father's, but with its own unique style. While Minato's haori was white with red flame patterns along the bottom, Naruko's was dark red with sleek black flames, and proudly displayed the Namikaze crest on the back. She quickly slipped it on and performed a few practice hand signs, testing how it felt to move and train while wearing it. A few moments later, she turned to Jiraiya with a wide, cheerful grin. Thanks, Uro-senin. Now come on, let's train already. I waited all day yesterday. She said with enthusiasm, her voice full of energy. Jiraiya chuckled, although he did let out a small grumble about how energetic young ninjas could be. Nonetheless, he set down the scroll from his back and unrolled it across the ground in front of Naruko. Sign here, he instructed, pointing to a blank square on the scroll. You'll need to make a proper summoning contract. Naruko gave a confident nod, pricked her finger, and signed her name, Namikaze Naruko, right beside her father's. Once that was done, Jiraiya demonstrated a set of 5 hand signs, executing them with impressive speed. Without missing a beat, Naruko mirrored the same sequence, matching his pace. She repeated the set a few times to commit it to memory and nodded once she was confident. Jiraiya then explained that in order to summon a creature, she would need to channel a significant amount of chakra into her palm, then press it against the ground. Following his instructions carefully, Naruko smeared a bit of the small scratch she had on her palm and moved through the hand signs again. She focused her chakra, pushed it into her palm, and placed it on the ground. Summoning jutsu? She called out confidently. With a small puff of smoke, an orange toad appeared on the ground before them. The cheerful little amphibian looked around, saw Naruko and Jiraiya, and waved with a friendly grin. Hey! Got any snacks? He asked with a light-hearted tone, making Naruko laugh softly as she pointed toward her house. There might be something in the kitchen. Go ahead and check. I'm Naruko, by the way, the new toad summoner, she said kindly. Nice to meet you. I'm Gamakichi, son of Gamabunta and older brother of Gamatatsu, the toad replied proudly before hopping toward the kitchen. Once he was out of sight, Naruko looked back at her godfather and smiled. All right, let's keep going. Chunin Exams Arena. Naruko stood confidently in the center of the arena alongside 6 other genin. Despite her brave posture, she felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. It wasn't the crowd of onlookers that made her anxious, it was the powerful presence of the 4 esteemed leaders sitting in the cage booth, the Hokage, Kazekage, Tsuchikage, and rakeage. After all, it's not every day a young ninja gets to showcase her skills before such influential figures. Somewhere in the crowd were also her godparents, her friend Tamari, her teammates, and Kakashi-sensei with their friends. She didn't want to disappoint them, especially after all the hard work she had put into her training. But there was no turning back now. The moment grew still as the third Hokage rose to give his welcoming speech. As he spoke, Naruko reflected on the past week with Tamari. The two had spent time together training lightly and brainstorming ideas for Naruko's new book. It had been a week filled with both fun and focus. The first match will be between Sabero of Konoha and Noriko of Iwa. Everyone else, please head to the waiting area, the proctor announced. Naruko and the other Genin made their way to the designated balcony beneath the cage booth. As the match began, Naruko leaned casually against the wall, watching the fight closely. She was determined to gather as much insight as she could, knowing that every bit of information would help her in the upcoming challenges. The fight was brief. Sabero was a skilled kenjutsu fighter with a few genjutsu techniques, but Naruko used a jutsu that created chakra-enhanced stone armor around her body, making it impossible for the Konoha Genin to penetrate it. Naruko ended the match with a powerful kick to Sabero's torso, showing that either the armor had given her a power boost or that she had exceptional natural strength. Soon, the second match was called, and Naruko felt a bit more nervous than before. However, she stepped into the middle of the arena, and the entire crowd erupted into cheers. Naruko heard a group of teenage girls calling her a cutie and, when she glanced over at Tamari, she noticed her twitching and being held down by Baki, her escort. It was no surprise that several girls her age blushed as they looked at Naruko. She wore a black face mask, a long-sleeved black muscle shirt, black shinobi pants, and her new haori. On her hands, she wore black ninja gloves with a metal plate on them, and her hitai 8 was securely tied around her forehead. As Naruko watched her opponent enter the arena, she saw that the girl was wearing a simple black battle kimono. She had short brown hair and black eyes, and a ninjato peeked over her right shoulder. Nanami of Suna vs Naruko of Konoha, begin. The proctor called before jumping back to give them space. Naruko jumped backward and performed several hand seals while still mid-air. Raiten, pale lightning. A thin, white stream of lightning shot from her fingertips toward her opponent. Nanami narrowly avoided it, causing the lightning to slice through her hair. She looked at Naruko with wide eyes before narrowing them. She unsheathed her ninjato and charged forward. Seeing Nanami closing in, Naruko smirked and formed a single hand seal. Suten, water genjutsu. Naruko created a water pistol from her right hand and shot a fast, powerful ball of water at her opponent. Nanami used her blade to deflect the attack. After feeling the water stop, Nanami glanced at her ninjato and was surprised to see a dent in it. She quickly reinforced her blade with chakra and continued her attack. Naruko had already pulled out 2 kunai and was ready. When Nanami got close, she attempted to strike, but Naruko parried with one of her kunai and countered with a slash at Nanami's face with the other. The Suna nin tilted her head back just in time to avoid the cut. She then performed a pirouette and tried to slash down on Naruko, who sidestepped the attack. Nanami quickly tried to sweep Naruko's legs out from under her, but Naruko somersaulted backward, throwing 2 kunai at her opponent while mid-air. Nanami, caught off guard by the attack, could only block 1 kunai aimed at her face, while the second hit her right thigh, causing her to hiss in pain. She quickly removed the kunai and threw it back at Naruko, who caught it with ease, smirking at her opponent. Naruko charged forward and threw a right hook, which Nanami blocked. Nanami attempted a horizontal slash, but Naruko used her palm to stop her wrist, making Nanami drop her sword. Nanami tried to duck and grab her sword, but she had to roll back to avoid Naruko's knee to the face. Naruko swiftly kicked the blade out of her opponent's reach, earning a frustrated TSK from Nanami. Nanami immediately rushed forward and launched a spinning kick, but Naruko caught her ankle and threw her over her shoulder. The Suna Kunoichi quickly corrected herself in mid-air and landed in a crouch, only to roll to the side to avoid Naruko's axe kick. Nanami launched a rising kick toward Naruko's chin, sending her into the air. To everyone's surprise, Naruko performed a pirouette in midair and threw a kunai at Nanami's face. Nanami narrowly dodged but still received a small cut on her cheek. She quickly made several hand seals and inhaled deeply. Futon, Air Bullets Jutsu. Nanami exhaled a dozen small but deadly orbs of wind toward Naruko, who raised her arms to protect her face and vital areas. Naruko was hit a few times, and when she landed, she saw that the small wounds were causing a bit of bleeding. She looked up at her smirking opponent and formed a single hand seal, charging at her again. Nanami tensed as Naruko appeared in front of her, launching a right jab. Nanami blocked the attack, but at the last moment, Naruko disappeared and reappeared behind her, shocking the crowd. Naruko delivered an uppercut to Nanami's tailbone, causing her to gasp in pain. Nanami couldn't defend herself from Naruko's next attack, a back kick to her back, which made her stumble forward. Before she could react, Naruko was in front of her again, delivering a rising kick to her chin, sending Nanami into the air. Naruko finished her combo by appearing above Nanami and executing an axe kick to her opponent's gut, causing Nanami to gasp for air as she hit the ground. Winner, Naruko of Konoha. The proctor shouted, and the entire crowd erupted into cheers. Naruko grinned and bowed respectfully toward the four cages before returning to the balcony. Cage booth. So that is the daughter of the Yellow Flash, interesting, the Sandaime Tsuchikage, Aniki, mused while observing the blonde who was walking back to the balcony. They heard a grunt and turned to the Yondaime Raikage. Hi. This child is fast for her age, even if she was holding back with those seals that Minato created, the Raikage remarked, causing Hiruzen to smile slightly. It wasn't widely known, but both I and Minato had become good friends and rivals after the war, so it was clear that the black-skinned man would be keen to see how his friend's child had developed. Which seals do you mean, Raikage Dono? Raza asked the bulky man. I smirked and turned back to the arena. Gravity seals. Minato created them to train speed and reaction time of the user. When the user applies a gravity seal, their whole body is pushed down by gravity, making it harder to walk and fight. There are 10 levels to the seal, and if I remember correctly, Minato was on the 9th level when we last met, 2 weeks before the QB attack, I explained. Before any further questions could be asked, the next match began. With Naruko. The blonde Shinon watched the match between a member of the Hyuga clan main branch and a puppeteer from Suna. The fight lasted longer than the first, but shorter than the second. Ko, the Hyuga, figured out that Hiroshi had been hiding in the trees, and the Hyuga had actually been fighting a puppet. Soon, the battle turned into a game of tag. Ko ran after his real opponent while being chased by the puppet, which had no long-range weapons, forcing it to get closer. After about 2 minutes, Ko managed to substitute with a branch next to the puppeteer and then used Juken to win the fight. The fourth match began shortly after. This battle was between a dark-skinned Kumo nin, Rakuto, a ninjutsu specialist, and a red-haired Suna nin, Ichiro, who was also skilled in ninjutsu. The two launched a barrage of jutsu at each other, each trying to overpower the other. If Naruko had to describe the fight, she would call it flashy. For a civilian watching, it was an amazing sight to see ninjas unleash fire and lightning from their hands, but for a ninja, it was somewhat dull. None of the jutsu came close to landing a hit, and the battle ended with both fighters collapsing from chakra exhaustion. The match concluded in a draw, and now it was Naruko's turn to fight the kunoichi from Iwa. The two stood across from each other, waiting for the proctor to begin the match. As Naruko observed her opponent, she saw her finger twitch slightly, signaling that, as soon as the match began, she would start doing hand seals to prepare for her jutsu. Naturally, anyone else might have tried to interrupt her to prevent the technique, but Naruko had different plans. Begin. The proctor called out, and as expected, Noriko jumped back and began making hand seals. Doten, stone armor jutsu. She shouted, and as soon as she touched the ground, stones from beneath her rose and formed an armor that shielded her body, leaving only her face exposed. She looked at her opponent and was surprised to see Naruko standing still, arms crossed. Aren't you going to do anything? Noriko asked, slightly irritated. Naruko narrowed her eyes, unfolded her arms, and began walking toward her opponent. "How hard do you think it is to destroy this armor?" Naruko asked, suddenly halting her steps. The girl scoffed and assumed a fighting stance. "You'll have to find out for yourself, if you can," Noriko said arrogantly, causing the blonde to smirk. "I intend to," Naruko replied, her expression shifting to one of seriousness. "Don't blink, or you might miss it," she warned, making Noriko more cautious. From the cage booth, both the Raikage and Tsuchikage gasped upon hearing the blonde's words. Hiruzen turned to them and asked what had just happened. "It's the same phrase her father used before performing the Hiraishin against a legion of Iwa Nin," Tsuchikage said bitterly. Everyone turned their attention to the blonde to see what she would do next. "Come on, aren't you going to do anything?" Noriko taunted, about to rush toward Naruko. But just as she took a step, the entire arena felt the massive surge of chakra. Suddenly, Naruko vanished and reappeared in front of Noriko, a Rasengan in her right palm. Before Noriko could react, Naruko slammed the Rasengan into her torso, shattering her stone armor and sending her crashing into the nearby station wall. The proctor rushed over to check on her pulse and sighed with relief when he confirmed that Noriko was only unconscious. Before the proctor could announce Naruko as the winner, they all heard the blonde groan. "Damn, using a substitution at that speed, with no hand seals and just a kunai, really puts a strain on the chakra coils," Naruko muttered, turning back to her original position. Everyone in the audience looked in that direction, and sure enough, they saw a kunai lodged into the ground. "Man, I'm lucky I left that there from the last fight," Naruko chuckled. The Iwa and Kumo ninjas collectively sighed in relief, glad it wasn't the dreaded jutsu of the Yondaime Hokage. "Winner, Naruko of Konoha," the proctor declared, and a 5-minute break was called before the next fight that everyone had been waiting for. Namikaze Naruko vs Hyuga Ko, begin. For a few tense moments, there was complete silence until both fighters surged toward each other and met in the center of the arena. The two engaged in a fast-paced taijutsu match that, to an onlooker, appeared as nothing more than blurred figures, but to an experienced shinobi, it was clear that they were exchanging powerful punches, kicks, blocks, and evasive maneuvers. Naruko blocked a palm strike aimed at her shoulder and swiftly retaliated with a roundhouse kick, which Ko blocked with a raised knee. The Hyuga then countered with a double palm strike aimed at Naruko's shoulder, but she dropped low, attempting a sweep kick. Ko leapt over it and launched a side kick towards Naruko, who blocked it with both hands. Naruko feinted a right hook, but just as she was about to strike, she placed her hand on the ground and executed a rising kick aimed at Ko's unguarded chin. A split second before the attack could land, Ko began to spin, releasing chakra from his tenketsu. A dome of chakra surrounded him and sent Naruko flying back. "Hakushu Kaiten." Ko's voice rang out as the blonde shinobi regained her footing midair and landed in a crouch. The chakra dome faded, revealing Ko's confident smirk. "Give up," Ko boasted. "This is the Hyuga clan's ultimate defense, there's no way to break through it." Naruko, however, smirked in return. "You're so sure no attack can break Kaiten?" she asked, and after receiving a confident nod, she added, "Let's make a wager. I'll use one jutsu to try and break your defense, and if I fail, I'll forfeit. What do you say?" Naruko chuckled inwardly when she saw Ko nod with an arrogant grin. "Bring it," Ko said, preparing himself for whatever Naruko had planned. Naruko glanced over at the cage booth, her grin widening. She then flexed her right shoulder and exhaled, focusing her energy. She performed 4 hand seals at a slow and steady pace, and when she finished with the monkey seal, she caught her right wrist with her left hand and began to channel chakra into her palm. A moment later, crimson lightning crackled around Naruko's hand, its glow sharp and vibrant. It danced around her palm as the crowd noticed she had perfect control over it. Had the lighting been blue, many would have assumed it was Reikiri, but Naruko called it something else. "Suzaku," she said aloud before charging toward Ko, who was already beginning to spin. "Kaiten." "Shuuroken." The two jutsu collided for a few moments, struggling for dominance, until Naruko's crimson blade easily sliced through the chakra shield, cutting into Ko's right shoulder. Ko cried out in pain, but before he could react, Naruko struck the back of his neck with a precise blow, causing him to stagger, and she swiftly disarmed him by severing his arm from his shoulder. Winner, Namikaze Naruko. The announcer declared as the crowd erupted in applause. My dear YouTube family. That's all for now. I hope you enjoyed today's content. Remember to like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more awesome videos. Until next time, stay awesome, keep those tentacles moving, and always dive deep into the world of anime. Thank you for being part of this journey. Anime Octopus.